My name is Lyra Smith, and for years, I meticulously nurtured a dream. A restaurant born from countless sketches, whispered hopes, and the fervent belief that this endeavor would finally make my family see me, truly see me. I imagined their proud faces, their arms wrapped around me on opening night. Instead, not a single one of them came. Every impeccably set table remained starkly empty, each polished surface reflecting only the flicker of lonely candlelight. While I stood in a meticulously designed, silent dining room, my untouched lemon tart a testament to a love unreciprocated. They were busy laughing. Their cheers, I later learned, were for my brother Ezra's impromptu backyard party, where cheap beer flowed under carelessly strung lights, a stark, mocking contrast to the refined atmosphere I had painstakingly created. Hours later, the buzz of my phone shattered the profound silence. It was Dad, his text as cold and transactional as a ledger entry. "We should discuss what you owe the family for that restaurant." My reply, carefully crafted and devoid of emotion, would become the catalyst for a reckoning, a moment that forced them to confront their own actions and ultimately, to regret everything. But before I tell you exactly what unfolded that night, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. And if you've ever found yourself feeling like an invisible outsider within your own family, please tap that like button and hit subscribe so I know I'm not alone in this fight for validation. The night my restaurant, the Ember and Elm, finally opened its doors, I had made a firm promise to myself: don't stare at the door, don't watch for them. But as the evening wore on, that promise crumbled. Each creak of the hinges, each new arrival that wasn't them, sent a fresh wave of hope crashing into a sharp, bitter betrayal. The dining room itself was a vision of perfection, a culmination of years of quiet dedication. Tables were polished until they gleamed like dark mirrors, reflecting the soft glow of hand-dipped candles that burned down at a leisurely pace. Each setting featured a delicate, handwritten menu card, a personal touch I'd spent hours perfecting. I had curated a playlist, too, a collection of timeless songs that instantly transported me back to a simpler childhood. Melodies Mom used to hum, off-key but heartfelt, as she cooked Sunday breakfast. That night, however, the nostalgic tunes looped endlessly on empty speakers, a mournful soundtrack to my solitude. More than success or profit, I desperately wanted them to see me, to truly comprehend the monumental effort, the unwavering passion I had poured into building this beautiful space. For as long as I could remember, I had been the family's quiet, indispensable support system. I carried heavy bags of groceries into their kitchens, my arms aching but my heart full, cooked elaborate meals for countless birthdays, perfected the Thanksgiving turkey, and even catered Ezra's college graduation party. "You've got the touch, Jules," Dad would often say, using my childhood nickname, but the compliment always came with that same patronizing smile, the one that unspokenly added, "Asterisk, but it's just a hobby, dear, not a viable career path star." So when I finally announced I was opening my own place, a physical manifestation of my life's work, the reactions were painfully predictable. Mom's lips pursed so tightly they practically disappeared, as if I just declared I was running off to join a traveling circus. Ezra, ever the golden boy with his cutting wit, merely smirked and asked, "Are you going to call it Lyra's little experiment?" Yet, deep down, a hopeful ember flickered within me. "They'll come around," I told myself. Asterisk families argue. Families doubt. But families still show up star. That night, however, my family didn't. Instead, I watched Ezra's Instagram story unfold across my phone. Each shaky video clip a dagger to my heart. There he was, my brother, center stage, clumsily cutting a sheet cake in their cluttered backyard, while my entire family clapped and cheered. Promotion party vibes. The caption read, "A glib celebration of his latest corporate climb." I scrolled through images of flimsy plastic chairs, paper plates piled high, and beer bottles sweating in the grass. And behind him, clear as day, were my parents, my aunts, my uncles, all of them laughing, dancing, vibrant and full of life. Not one of them, not Mom, not Dad, not even Ezra, had bothered to send a single text message, a simple word to say they couldn't make it. I clung to a desperate shred of hope, telling myself, Asterisk, maybe they'll surprise me later. Maybe they'll show up for dessert, for the grand finale star. But by 10 p.m., the last hopeful flicker had died. I was folding untouched napkins, each crisp crease a fresh wound, and scraping clean plates that had never known a morsel of food. My lemon tart, the very one Ezra had practically begged me to bake for his high school graduation party, sat solitary and untouched on the counter, its vibrant yellow a cruel mockery of my faded hopes. When Dad's text finally arrived, its words were as casual and detached as a quarterly financial report. We need to talk about your restaurant. No apology, no acknowledgement of my existence, just a stark reminder that, to him, my life's deepest dream was nothing more than a potential line item in his meticulously kept ledger. I didn't reply immediately. I simply stared at that message, watching the letters blur through a haze of unshed tears. Years of being the family's backup plan, the convenient second choice, the artsy one, with the predictably impractical dreams. All of it boiled to a scalding, bitter surface. And then, a searing realization cut through the fog of pain. They hadn't forgotten me. They had deliberately ignored me. That, I understood then, had been the unspoken theme of my entire life. Ezra was always the golden boy, the shining achiever, the undeniable star whose trophies gleamed proudly on the mantel, whose college acceptance letter was framed like a priceless relic, whose every promotion Dad wore like a coveted badge of honor. And me? I was merely background noise, the one Mom would introduce with a tight smile as our creative daughter, the free spirit, which was just her polite, passive-aggressive way of saying, the disappointment. But what they never understood was the hidden power in being ignored. It teaches you how to truly listen, to observe with unnerving clarity, to wait for the opportune moment. That night, as I methodically wiped down the counters, the scent of phantom dinners lingering in the air, and turned off the lights of my empty restaurant, a profound and unshakable decision settled deep within me. I was done begging for their approval. I was done leaving the door unlocked, metaphorically and literally, for people who would never choose to walk through it. If my own family could treat me like an insignificant footnote, then perhaps they didn't deserve a seat at my table at all. The decision crystallized into a single, unyielding sentence. It was short, cutting, and utterly final. My fingers, surprisingly steady, typed out the words, and then I hit send, a tremor of power running through me. Effective immediately, the Ember and Elm is closed to all family members. No reservations, no discounts, no exceptions. Within minutes, my phone erupted, blazing like a fire alarm in the dead of night. 19 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, each one more frantic than the last. And then, a hesitant knock echoed from the back kitchen door. Of course, it was Ezra. He stood there, framed by the harsh fluorescent glow of the kitchen, one hand casually tucked into his pocket, the other clutching a cheap cardboard cake box. I didn't open the door right away. Instead, I watched him through the glass, observing his perfectly pressed blazer and carefully combed hair. He looked like a man who had celebrated too hard, now nursing a hangover that hadn't quite blossomed into genuine guilt. When I finally unlatched the door, the cloying scent of his too-strong cologne hit me before his words did. "Figured you'd want a slice?" he mumbled, lifting the box with a practiced ease, as if it were a genuine peace offering. Inside, I caught a glimpse of the frosted inscription. "To bigger things." I didn't move. My arms remained crossed tightly across my chest, my gaze unwavering. "Bigger things, huh?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet laced with ice. "Guess my restaurant didn't quite make the cut." His practiced smile faltered, a crack in his smooth facade. "Come on, Jules," he began, resorting to the old nickname, trying to soften me. "We didn't think it was that big of a deal. Dad said it was more of a soft launch vibe." "Soft launch?" I repeated, my voice still soft, but with an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "I texted Mom 3 times. I made your favorite lemon tart, Ezra. It sat untouched for 5 hours. Tell me, does that sound like a soft launch to you?" He shifted his weight uncomfortably, his eyes darting away from mine. "People got busy." "No," I countered, stepping closer, closing the distance between us until the flimsy cake box wavered visibly in his hand. People got lazy. People made choices. And every single one of you chose not to show up. For a second, the mask completely cracked. His jaw tightened, and the carefully constructed smile vanished, revealing a flicker of something ugly underneath. Dad wants to invest, he blurted, abruptly changing the subject, his voice taking on a forced, businesslike tone. He sees potential now. He asked me to talk to you. There it was. The real reason he'd come. Not guilt, not genuine concern, certainly not love. Just business. Just control. Tell Dad the restaurant is fully funded, I replied, my voice steady. And the investor bought exclusive rights to my loyalty. Ezra blinked, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. What does that mean? It means you're late, I said, reaching for the overflowing trash bag by the door. And I don't do leftovers. I tossed the bag into the dumpster with a decisive thud, the sharp sound echoing in the quiet alley. His shoulders slumped, but his mouth kept working, trying to salvage the situation. Jules, come on. Don't make this into some big drama. We're family. I looked him dead in the eye, letting the full weight of my hurt settle between us. Exactly, I said, which is precisely why it hurts more. I shut the door, the click final and resounding. His footsteps faded, slow and heavy, until only the profound silence remained. The next morning, I took an axe to the past, not just metaphorically. I changed the locks, not only at the Ember and Elm but at my apartment, too. For years, my family had treated my personal space like a revolving door, a convenient extension of their own lives. Lyra, we need a place to crash for the weekend. Can we store some boxes in your spare room, just until we find a bigger house? Can I borrow your car, Jules, just until Monday? Each time I'd said yes, fearing that saying no would make me selfish, unloved. Deep down, I desperately believed that being useful was the only currency for affection, the only way to earn a place in their hearts. But true love, I realized with stinging clarity, doesn't flake on the most important night of your life. Love doesn't shrug off your invitations as if they're an inconvenience. So, I posted a new sign on the restaurant door, a message for the world, and especially for them. It was direct, defiant, and laced with a subtle jab. Due to overwhelming support, the Ember and Elm is transitioning to reservations only. No walk-ins accepted, even if we share DNA. By noon, a prominent food blogger had snapped a photo of the sign, intrigued by its boldness. By evening, it had gone viral. The comments poured in like a tidal wave of affirmation. This woman is my hero. Boundaries taste better than betrayal. Tell Ezra to eat a slice of humble pie. My phone buzzed nonstop, a symphony of notifications. Mom called 5 times, leaving a single indignant voicemail. Lyra, this is childish. We made a mistake, but you're making things worse. I didn't respond. Instead, I greeted the first couple who showed up after the story broke, tourists from Georgia, their eyes bright with curiosity and support. The woman smiled warmly as she settled into her seat. We canceled our other reservation just to eat here, she confided. As I led them to their table, a fleeting glimpse of my reflection caught my eye in the front window. I didn't look bitter. I didn't look angry. For the first time in my life, I looked utterly, wonderfully free. 2 days later, Dad appeared at my apartment. He wouldn't risk the restaurant, not with too many eyes, too many cameras, too many potential witnesses to his unraveling authority. I watched him through the peephole, a sliver of vision revealing a man in a rumpled suit jacket, his tie conspicuously loosened. He looked less like the formidable patriarch he imagined himself to be, and more like a man desperately losing control of a narrative he believed he alone had written. Let's be adults about this, Lyra. He began when I finally opened the door, but pointedly didn't step aside to let him in. You want to talk? I asked, my voice calm, steady. We talk here. His sigh was heavy, an exaggerated performance of weary exasperation. Your mother's upset. Ezra's confused. We all are. I folded my arms across my chest, mirroring his earlier posture. Confused about what? I challenged softly. That I finally stopped begging for a seat at your table? This is ridiculous, he snapped, his composure cracking. We're not enemies. No. I agreed, my voice even unruffled. You're just people who conveniently forget I exist unless I'm footing the bill or cooking the meal. He flinched visibly, then lowered his voice, shifting tactics. I was going to help you, Lyra. I was looking into some financing options for your little venture. You mean equity? I shot back, understanding his game instantly. You mean control. His face hardened, momentarily losing its veneer of concern. Don't be paranoid, Lyra. I stepped back inside, grabbed a heavy manila envelope from the console table, and handed it to him. Here's the deed, I said. The restaurant is solely in my name. The LLC, the recipes, the patents, all mine. His eyes flicked rapidly over the papers, scanning the legal jargon. You got a lawyer, he stated, a hint of grudging respect in his tone. I got a team, I corrected, a faint smile touching my lips. Funny what happens when you stop waiting for permission to shine. He muttered something about burning bridges, a familiar threat. Then I guess I'll learn to swim, I answered calmly. When the door clicked shut behind him, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if a lifetime of invisible burdens had finally lifted. But the battle, I knew, was far from over. That very night, Ezra's fiancée, Natalie, appeared at the Ember and Elm. She was trembling, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She slid into a secluded booth, her eyes darting nervously around the now bustling restaurant, as if expecting to be followed. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know how far they'd go. I stayed quiet, simply watching her, waiting. They created a WhatsApp group, she continued, her voice gaining a fragile strength. Your mom, Ezra, Aunt Linda, even Cousin Mark. They called it Project Reset. The plan was to pressure you into selling the restaurant or failing that, to actively force you to fail. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she pushed her phone across the table toward me. The screen glowed with damning evidence. Screenshots of messages, precise dates, chilling voice notes, irrefutable proof. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my own voice a dry rasp. Her voice cracked. Because they dragged me into it. And because I don't want to marry someone who treats his sister like that. I stared at the illuminated evidence. The pixels a cold, hard truth. My family wasn't merely dismissing me anymore. They were actively, maliciously trying to destroy me. And in that harrowing moment, I knew with chilling certainty. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a petty family spat. This was war. I didn't sleep that night. Natalie's phone, with its glowing screen and damning evidence, burned in my mind. Every screenshot was seared into my memory, each damning word replaying on an endless loop. Project Reset. The name alone made my stomach twist with a visceral disgust. This wasn't just careless words or petty jealousy. This was strategy. This was calculated sabotage, a deliberate campaign to ruin me. And the orchestrators were the very people who shared my blood. The next morning, I found Grandma at her kitchen table, her hands, once so nimble, now shaking noticeably as she clipped coupons. The early sun poured through the blinds, striping the table in patterns of golden shadow. She didn't ask where I'd been, or why my face looked like I hadn't closed my eyes in days. She simply pushed a plate of perfectly buttered toast toward me, the butter melting into the corners. Eat, she said softly, her voice raspy with age and unspoken worry. I sat opposite her, staring at her fragile, spotted hands. She had always been the one who truly saw me, not the ambitious chef, not the family disappointment, just Lyra. She was the one who slipped me a 20 when Dad barked about responsibility, the one who clapped the loudest, her eyes brimming with pride, at my terrible high school talent show performance. And now, the very family she had raised, the legacy she had cultivated, was actively plotting to erase me. Grandma, I asked carefully, my voice barely a whisper, Did Dad ever pressure you about money? Her eyes flickered, a momentary spark of something old and weary, then settled on her coffee cup. He's always had ideas, she murmured, her voice thin. Investments, plans. But then her voice cracked, and she stopped, unable to finish the thought. That was my answer. Her silence, far more potent than any words, confirmed my worst fears. By the time I walked into my restaurant that afternoon, a new resolve coursed through my veins. I had already called 3 numbers. 1 lawyer, 1 forensic accountant, and 1 old friend who knew how to dig into things the internet could hide. The smear campaign, insidious and coordinated, had already begun. Yelp reviews, identical in their phrasing, suddenly flooded my page. Food was cold. Staff was rude. We didn't belong. None of them matched my reservation log. It was a war waged by keyboard, invisible yet lethal. But I refused to crumble. That night, I sat across from my lawyer, a formidable woman named Davis, whose hair was pulled back so tightly it looked as if it could cut glass. She flipped through Natalie's screenshots, her lips pressed into a thin, grim line. This isn't just family drama, Lyra, she said flatly, her voice devoid of any pretense. This is organized interference, harassment, maybe even fraud. What can we do? I asked, my voice lower than I intended, raw with a mix of fear and fury. We start with a cease and desist, Davis replied, her eyes sharp and assessing. And then we build a case. Elder financial abuse, attempted coercion, defamation. But we'll need more than just screenshots. We'll need a witness. My chest tightened. Natalie's trembling hands, her whispered confession. I don't want to marry someone who treats his sister like that. She'll testify, I said, my voice steady, certain. She knows the truth. Davis nodded once, a brief, decisive movement. Good. Then here's the plan. We let them think they're winning. We watch. We gather everything. And when they come back from whatever little trip they're on, we'll be waiting with paperwork they can't ignore. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time in days. The plan wasn't born of revenge for revenge's sake. It was about survival, about protection, about carving boundaries in stone instead of sketching them in sand. But boundaries, I was quickly learning, came at a cost. That week, Grandma seemed to wilt under the heavy cloak of silence that had fallen between her and the rest of the family. She watered her garden in the mornings, tending to her prize-winning roses in the afternoons, but she moved with a profound slowness, as if her body carried invisible weights. Every time the phone rang with Mom's name flashing on the caller ID, I watched her flinch, her shoulders tensing. She didn't pick up. She didn't defend herself or me. She just stayed quiet, a silent testament to the pain. One evening, I found her staring at an old, faded photograph. Our family, all smiles and intertwined arms, at Ezra's high school graduation. Everyone, that is, except me, standing awkwardly at the very end, half cropped out of the frame. Maybe I should call them, she whispered, her voice frail. No, I said quickly, too quickly, my own fear for her lashing out. Grandma, they don't want to fix this. They want to erase it. They want to erase me. Her eyes welled with tears, but she nodded, slowly tucking the photograph back into its frame. She didn't argue. I walked away, a fresh wave of guilt tearing at me. But then, I remembered Dad's insidious words at my apartment. I was going to help you. His version of help had always come with invisible strings, chains disguised as lifelines. I wasn't falling for it again. The next move from them came faster than I expected, a sharp, calculated escalation. My phone rang. It was my primary food supplier, his voice thick with apology. Lyra, he began. We got a call from your dad. Said you weren't paying your invoices. He told us to pull your account. My blood ran cold, a glacial shock. That's a lie. I snapped, the words bursting from me. Check your records. He did. Your payments are early, Lyra, he admitted, clearly uncomfortable. But he sounded so convincing. Convincing. That was Dad's true gift. He could look a stranger in the eye, spin a fabricated story, and make it gospel truth. That night, I sat with Davis again, the folder of evidence growing thicker between us. She tapped her pen against the table, her expression unreadable. "He's escalating," she observed. "That's good. It makes him sloppy. Keep documenting everything." I left the meeting with a folder heavier than my chest felt. Yet something else stirred inside me. Not just anger, not just hurt, but a hardened, unshakable resolve. I started talking to my staff differently, my voice firmer, clearer, radiating a newfound authority. "We protect this space," I told them during our morning huddle, my gaze sweeping across their faces. "We don't let the noise outside define us. We cook, we serve, we stand tall." They nodded, some of them even smiling, a shared defiance igniting in their eyes. One of the servers, a single mom named Carla, squeezed my arm. "You're stronger than them, Lyra," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Stronger than they'll ever know." That night, after closing, I wrote in my notebook, each word a testament to my unwavering commitment. The day they come home, we'll be ready, because they were coming back. They always did, expecting doors to be open, plates to be waiting, forgiveness served up like a sweet, inevitable dessert. Not this time. 2 weeks later, the word finally came. Mom, Dad, Ezra. They'd been on some ostentatious family trip, flaunting sun-drenched photos on social media, beaches, sparkling cocktails, vapid captions about new beginnings. Meanwhile, my Yelp page continued to bleed one-star reviews, like someone had systematically hacked the system. But I didn't panic. I prepared. I gathered every single fake review, meticulously cross-checked them against my reservation logs, highlighting every glaring contradiction. I printed Natalie's screenshots, had them notarized. Davis, with her quiet efficiency, drafted the formidable stack of paperwork. The night before their flight landed, I stood alone in my restaurant's dining room. The lights dimmed, the air thick with the comforting sense of garlic and rosemary from the day's cooking. My staff cleaned quietly around me, their soft laughter a steady, reassuring hum. I looked around at the space, at the tables I'd polished, the chairs I'd chosen, the kitchen I'd poured my soul into, and a fierce, undeniable truth resonated within me. Asterisk, this is mine. They can't touch it, not unless I let them star. When I went home, Grandma was asleep in her favorite armchair, a half-finished crossword puzzle resting in her lap. I gently tucked a blanket over her shoulders and kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow," I whispered, though she didn't stir. "Tomorrow, it's our turn." I lay in bed, my phone face down on the nightstand. My hands didn't shake anymore. My breath came slow, steady, because the fear had finally burned away, leaving only a crystal-clear clarity. This wasn't about asking them to see me anymore. This was about making sure they couldn't erase me, couldn't erase us. The day they returned, we would be waiting, armed with the law, with the truth, with everything they'd never expected me to have. The airport always carried the same distinct scent. Burnt coffee, a chemical tang of floor polish, and too many perfumes mingling in one recycled airspace. I stood near the arrival's gate, Davis a formidable presence at my side, a thick manila folder tucked casually under her arm like a finely honed weapon. My palms were dry. No sweat, no trembling, just a profound stillness. The flight from Cancun landed 15 minutes late. A stream of people poured out, a chaotic ballet of families juggling suitcases, kids dragging worn stuffed animals, couples with matching sunburns and newly braided hair. And then I saw them. Dad first, his shoulders squared, rolling a sleek black suitcase, an air of proprietorship surrounding him. Mom trailed behind, sunglasses perched on her head, her lips a tight, thin line. And Ezra, tanned and grinning, scrolling through his phone as if the entire world owed him its undivided attention. They spotted me almost instantly. Dad slowed, his gaze locking onto mine. Ezra's smirk widened, a dismissive gesture. Mom whispered something under her breath, her eyes narrowed. Davis, a silent sentinel until now, stepped forward. "Mr. Smith," she stated, her voice clear and authoritative amidst the airport din. You've been served. She held out the thick envelope, its contents heavy with the weight of my truth. Dad froze. For the very first time in my life, I saw him hesitate, a rare, uncalculated pause. Not calculating, not charming, not dismissive. Just hesitate. Travelers flowed around us, their curious glances darting our way. Ezra, ever quick to deflect, let out a derisive laugh. Seriously, Lyra? In public? You've officially lost it. I locked eyes with him, holding his gaze without a flicker. No, Ezra, I replied, my voice a soft counterpoint to the bustling terminal. I found it. Dad snatched the envelope. His jaw clenched so tightly it seemed painful, flipping through the pages with furious speed. This is ridiculous. He sputtered, his voice rising in indignation. You think you can drag your own family through the mud? Over hurt feelings? I stepped closer, my voice remaining low, but clear enough for the curious onlookers to hear. Over fraud, I clarified, each word a hammer blow. Over harassment, over trying to destroy everything I built, because you couldn't stand that it wasn't yours to control. Mom finally spoke, her voice sharp as broken glass. Stop making a scene, Lyra. We can settle this at home. I shook my head, a definitive gesture. No, Mom. Home is where you ignore me. Home is where Ezra gets a promotion cake while my restaurant sits empty. This? I gestured, encompassing Davis, the legal papers, the growing crowd of witnesses with their recording phones. This is where accountability happens. Ezra's grin finally faltered, his bravado cracking under the pressure. Come on, Jules, he pleaded, a hint of desperation in his voice. Don't act like you're some victim. You shut us out. You banned your own family from your restaurant. I met his gaze without blinking, my resolve absolute. Because family doesn't get to eat at my table if they can't even show up for me once. The words hung heavy in the air, louder than the incessant chatter of travelers, louder than the blaring overhead announcements. Dad, his face contorted with rage, jabbed a finger toward me. This will come back to bite you, Lyra. You're burning bridges you'll regret. I stepped forward, closing the distance until his accusatory finger hovered mere inches from my chest. Then I'll learn to swim, I said, my voice unwavering, a calm promise. His face contorted, a mask of fury. He opened his mouth to retort, but Davis cut in, her voice calm and sharp as a scalpel. Mr. Smith, you have been formally notified. Any attempt to interfere with Mrs. Smith's business from this point forward will result in immediate legal escalation. He sputtered, flipping through the documents again, his eyes widening as he recognized the weight of the evidence. You can't. He stammered, but he stopped mid-sentence because he saw them. The notarized screenshots, Natalie's detailed testimony, the meticulously cross-referenced fake reviews, all of it laid out, undeniable. Mom clutched his arm, her eyes darting around at the small, captivated crowd. Let's go, she hissed, her voice barely a whisper, thick with panic. Phones were out. People were recording. Ezra muttered, unbelievable, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. Fear. For once, the golden boy wasn't untouchable. Lyra, Dad said finally, his voice low, his teeth clenched in suppressed rage. You're making enemies you don't need. No, I said, calm and steady, meeting his furious gaze. I'm protecting myself from enemies I never asked for. The only difference now is that the world gets to see who you really are. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken accusations and shattered illusions. Then Dad turned abruptly, dragging Mom by the arm, the wheels of his sleek suitcase rattling angrily behind him. Ezra followed, slower, his shoulders tense, defeated. He glanced back once, his lips pressed into a tight, grim line, but he didn't say another word. They disappeared into the indifferent crowd, swallowed by the ceaseless churn of the airport. I exhaled a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Davis touched my arm, her touch reassuring. You did it, she said softly. No, I replied, watching the automatic doors slide shut behind them, sealing off that chapter of my life. We did it. But the confrontation didn't end at the airport. The smear campaign against the Ember and Elm collapsed almost overnight like a house of cards. The article Davis had arranged with a trusted journalist went live the very next morning. Chef exposes family's plot to sabotage her career. It was meticulously detailed, featuring the damning screenshots, the precise timelines, Natalie's brave testimony. Her name was right there, her words undeniably damning. The internet, ever hungry for drama and justice, lit up. #StandWithLyra trended globally. Old friends, long estranged, reached out with messages of support. Complete strangers left 5-star reviews for my restaurant, not just for the food, but for the story. Customers lined up at my door, eager to support the woman who stood up to her family. The Ember and Elm buzzed like never before, alive with the clinking of glasses, the joyous spill of laughter into the street, and plates cleared to the last crumb. My staff worked with a new energy, proud and defiantly united. They knew the truth, and now so did everyone else. But the biggest, most pivotal moment came 3 nights later. We were just closing up, the last patrons having left, when the door opened once more. Natalie stepped inside, pale but resolute, her quiet courage palpable. She slid into a booth, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "They're furious with me," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I couldn't marry into that. Not after what I saw, what I knew." I sat across from her, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. "You did the right thing, Natalie." She shook her head. "I just told the truth. You're the one who stood up to them." Her words lingered in the air as I walked her out, a profound sense of shift settling in me. For the first time, I didn't feel like the black sheep, the family outsider. I felt like someone who had finally rewritten her own story. The real turning point, the definitive closure, came in court weeks later. Dad, with his usual charm, tried to argue, to spin his practiced web of deceit. But the evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. The judge's words echoed through the silent courtroom, firm and unequivocal. Financial interference and attempted coercion of family assets will not be tolerated. Grandma's money, her fragile legacy, was protected, locked tight under legal guardianship. My restaurant's ownership was affirmed, mine alone unchallengeable. And the will was rewritten. Dad and Ezra, once so secure in their inheritance, were removed entirely, their names struck through like misspelled words. When the gavel struck, a sound that reverberated through the very bones of the courthouse, Dad's face went pale, a mask of shock. Ezra sat stone-faced, his fists clenched in impotent rage. Mom cried quietly in the back. But not for me. Never for me. I walked out of that courthouse with Grandma on my arm, her hand light but steady, a newfound strength in her grip. She whispered, "You saved us, Lyra." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "No, Grandma. I finally saved myself." The echo of that airport confrontation, the image of Dad frozen, Ezra speechless, Mom scrambling, it stayed with me. Not as a source of bitterness, but as a potent reminder. For once, the power wasn't theirs. It was mine, and I wasn't giving it back. The courthouse steps were warm under the afternoon sun, but I felt lighter than air, truly weightless for the first time in my life. Grandma's arm remained looped through mine, her small frame, once so frail, now steadier than I'd seen her in months. She smiled up at me with eyes that glistened, not with weakness or sorrow, but with profound, boundless pride. "Lyra," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet reverence. "You did what I never could." I squeezed her hand, a shared understanding passing between us. We did it together. The judgment didn't erase the scars, not entirely, but it had built something stronger, something unbreakable in their place. Dad and Ezra were officially cut from the will, their names struck through like corrections on a failed exam. Grandma's finances were locked tight under unwavering protection, and my restaurant, mine alone, was untouchable. That night, we returned to her little garden, a riot of carefully tended blooms that shimmered under the afternoon sun. She clipped roses, her movements fluid and unhurried, as if the world had just handed her back decades she'd unknowingly lost. The old woman who used to move with a quiet trepidation was gone, replaced by a gardener wholly present. Each snip of her silver shears was sharp, certain, a testament to newfound resolve. And when she placed a crimson bloom, still dewy from the sun, into my hands, I realized it wasn't just a flower. It was a tangible piece of trust, a fragile, vibrant offering from her soul to mine. I thought about the countless nights she'd sat at that worn kitchen table, meticulously folding coupons, her silence a heavy cloak she wore to avoid the family's incessant clamor. Back then, her quiet was fear, a carefully constructed invisibility. Now, gazing at her as she gathered her roses, her silence was different. It was peace, hard-won, deeply rooted, and utterly beautiful. My restaurant, too, had transformed into something far grander than a mere business. It was a sanctuary, a haven forged in the crucible of my own struggles. The viral headlines, undoubtedly, had initially drawn a curious crowd, but what kept them returning wasn't the sensationalism of the scandal. It was the raw, unvarnished honesty that permeated every dish, every conversation, every corner of the space. People walked through my doors because they'd read my story and, in the telling, saw echoes of their own lives. They were the overlooked sibling, the forgotten child, the one who worked twice as hard for half the recognition, constantly striving, perpetually unseen. They came for the food, yes, but they stayed for the profound, undeniable connection they found with one another, and with me. One particularly quiet evening, a woman came in alone, her shoulders hunched slightly, clutching a small leather notebook to her chest as if it contained her deepest secrets. She ordered the lemon tart, a golden ray of sunshine on the menu, and chose a seat at the counter. When I brought her plate, the citrusy aroma filling the air between us, she leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "I saw what you did," she said, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "My daughter wants to be a chef, Lyra, but she's so scared she'll never be good enough. I showed her your story. She said, if Lyra can stand up to her family, maybe I can too." Her quiet words hit me with the force of a tidal wave, nearly breaking me with their poignant truth. Because that's what this had become. Not revenge, not even a simple quest for justice, but a beacon, a flickering, persistent light in the darkness for others. It was living proof that you could fight back against the people who tried to keep you small, to diminish your dreams, and still, against all odds, build something truly beautiful, something entirely your own. Grandma visited often after that, a beloved fixture at her favorite corner table by the window. She'd sip her peppermint tea, a gentle smile playing on her lips, as she watched me work, her eyes alight with a renewed spark. She wasn't frail anymore. Her laughter rang out more freely, a joyful sound I hadn't heard nearly enough of in my lifetime. She even teased me about the ever-present line of customers winding out the door. "Looks like you've finally made it, Lyra," she'd say, her eyes twinkling, and I'd laugh, a full, unburdened sound. But deep down, beneath the easy humor, I knew she was right. Yet, this hard-won victory didn't erase everything. Some nights, when the restaurant was dark and hushed, the last table wiped clean, I'd walk home under the lonely glow of the streetlights. And in those quiet moments, Dad's warning at the airport would echo in my mind, cold and clear. Asterisk, this will come back to bite you. Asterisk, maybe it would. Maybe the bridges I'd burned behind me would remain nothing but desolate ashes. But I'd learned something far more profound, something that armed me against that old fear. I didn't need those bridges. I'd built my own road, brick by painful brick, and it led exactly where I needed to be. Months melted into a year, each one bringing more affirmation. My phone buzzed constantly, a steady stream of reservation requests. Food critics, once an intimidating prospect, now hailed me as a rising star, a culinary force to be reckoned with. And one sunny afternoon, my usually gruff landlord sat across from me, a wide grin stretching across his face as he cradled a steaming mug of coffee. "5 more years, Lyra," he declared, his voice booming with pride. "Lease locked, Rent stable. You're the pride of this block, you know that? I thought about all the times my family had scoffed at my dream, calling it fragile, unrealistic, a foolish flight of fancy. Now, strangers were rooting for me, their cheers louder, more genuine, than any encouragement I'd ever received from my own blood. And it wasn't because I begged for their approval. It was because, finally, I had stopped. At night, when the last dish was washed, the last chair stacked neatly, I often stood barefoot in the dining room, a wine glass cool in my hand. I'd breathe in the silence, not a lonely silence anymore, but a clean one, a chosen one, a silence that held the lingering scent of good food, shared laughter, and a profound sense of peace. Exactly 1 year later, a heavy, gold-foiled envelope arrived in the mail. Ezra's engagement brunch. The sheer audacity, the delicious irony of it, nearly made me laugh out loud. The very family who had once locked me out of their celebrations, who had deemed me unworthy of their presence, now wanted me to smile for their photos, to be a pleasant prop in their carefully constructed tableau. I set the ornate envelope on the counter, stared at the gilded script for a long, quiet moment, then dropped it into the blender. With a decisive press of the pulse button, shredded gold confetti swirled into a shimmering, meaningless dust. That same evening, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose, I finalized the lease on my second restaurant. Downtown, a historic brick building with soaring exposed beams, the promise of a rooftop garden, twice the kitchen space, twice the fire, both literal and metaphorical. I meticulously built a staff composed of overlooked dreamers, culinary grads with no connections but boundless talent, single mothers quietly rebuilding their lives and their forgotten skills, artists who had been told no too many times to count. Together, in that beautiful, gritty space, we built something sacred, not just food, but dignity. We cooked with intention, serving up not just meals, but a sense of belonging. On opening day, the air thrummed with excitement. A reporter, camera flashing, caught my eye. "What would you say to your family now?" she asked, her microphone extended. I smiled, slow and soft, a gentle curve that held no bitterness. "Nothing," I replied, the word hanging in the air, potent and absolute. "Because they don't need answers from me. They need accountability, and I have nothing left to prove." Later that night, the adrenaline of opening day slowly receding, I stood in the new kitchen, flour dusting my apron, dough sticking lightly to my fingers. Laughter, warm and genuine, filled the air behind me as my team unwound. Hope hummed, a low, steady vibration in the very bones of the building. Then, the heavy oak door swung open, and a young woman stepped inside, nervous energy radiating from her, her hands twisting together. "I saw your story," she began, her voice trembling slightly, a familiar refrain. "My daughter wants to be a chef. She's afraid she won't be good enough." I wiped my hands clean, a small smile playing on my lips, and handed her a menu, its pages thick with possibility. "Tell her this," I said, my voice kind but firm. They said the same to me. Her eyes shone, bright with a sudden, dawning comprehension, and in that moment, I knew. My story wasn't ending here. It was only just beginning. When I look back now, it isn't the missed chairs at my restaurant, the empty spaces where family could have sat, that sting the most. It's the years of silence, heavy and suffocating, that I tragically mistook for love. It's the meager scraps of attention, flung carelessly, that I desperately tried to make into full meals. But here's what I've learned, irrevocably and undeniably. Real love shows up. Real love doesn't keep score or demand control. It offers respect and freedom. And sometimes the bravest, most life-affirming thing you can do is to draw a firm, unwavering line, even if it means standing alone for a while, feeling the wind blow around you. I'm not the black sheep anymore. I'm not the backup plan or the daughter introduced with a dismissive shrug. I am Lyra Smith, chef, builder, survivor. And I know this much. Success seasoned with healthy boundaries tastes infinitely better than any apology I never received. Perhaps you've lived through something similar. Maybe your family tried to shrink you too to make you fit into a box too small for your spirit. If you've ever had to fight for your own worth, for the right to simply exist as your authentic self, please know this: you are not alone here. Share your story in the comments below. I'll be reading every single one. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because the next story, the next spark of inspiration, the next beacon of hope, might just be yours.